All right. Hopefully, our audio balancing issues have been ironed out. Um, we were having a bit of a, I don't know, thing with that before the broadcast started. Um, but, anyways, welcome to, well, I suppose, the official start of Season 8 of Fragments of Silicon. Uh, we we kick things off with our traditional reviews. And we got two up this week. First is Black the Fall. Not the latest release from Square Enix Collective. That's actually Children of the Zodiacs. But this was released just a few weeks ago, I believe. Like, I'm trying to remember.
Children of the Bad English?
Like, I guess. Yeah, let's see, when was Black the Fall released? Yeah, July 11th. So, yeah, just about like 2 weeks ago. And also important to note, we are interviewing the creators of this game on Tuesday.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, Zodiacs, I guess they might have been trying to be clever and not just...
Yeah, I'm like... We're also going to interview them, but they haven't given us codes yet. Like, I suspect we'll get codes, when we interview them. Anyway, getting back on topic here. Black the Fall, let's see. How would I quantify this? Well, on the surface, it's an indie puzzle platformer in that very indie-tacular aesthetic. Like,
yeah, it's not exact. It's too low tech to be cyberpunk, but too modern to be steampunk.
It seems to me like it's trying to be Abe's Odyssey.
Yeah.
I guess the best term I could come up with here is Soviet punk.
Something like that. Yeah, there's certainly plenty of hammer and sickles.
Well, it's important to know because the developers come from Eastern Europe, and I think I was told that some of them actually. I'm not sure if they were old enough to remember Soviet life, but they have
They're certainly old enough to know people who did.
Yeah, it's like there's much more of an emotional connection here than if I were reviewing this game from an American developer or a Australian developer, or something like that. Now, this iconography means a lot more
when it's not being appropriated.
Well, it's being cultural appropriation is a very complex term, let's say.
Right.
I'm like, cultural appropriation, by the way, goes on all the time. The short form when it becomes problematic is when the dominant culture starts digging into the subculture. But like I said, that's like we could have a very lengthy discussion on that kind of thing. Like, the point is, there are a lot more direct cultural connections here. I mean, like the hammer and the sickle is going to have cultural connotations over here to people of a certain age, but how much does the hammer and sickle mean to a millennial, who grew up in America, who grew up during the 90s when Russia became Russia,
or the Soviet Union, yeah.
Well, it's more the Soviet Union ceased to be a thing, and fell and kind of that's what this is harkening back to. It's
and the whole general people are cogs in the machine aesthetic is also very how Soviet communism works.
Right, or it's communism to its logical endpoint. You are literally nothing more than a piece of the machine to serve the state. And so anyway, the point being is there's a connection here culturally that wouldn't otherwise exist. How deep that goes, I'm not sure. That's probably one of the things we're going to figure out on Tuesday, like when we do the actual interview, because it's not just iconography and setting. Like, it's based off of real events. I'm like, I can think of one right off the top of my head, but that would be a massive, massive spoiler. It happens at the end of the game, like at the actual end. Like, and I'm like, how to address this? It's a famous moment in history. Let's just say.
Yeah.
And when you see it, you'll know what it is. Like, and there's also pictures of famous Russian dictators. You know, you got Stalin, Lenin. I think I saw Trotsky there. Like
pretty early on, there's this room with 4 portraits.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. I'm trying to remember who the fourth guy was. I want to say Khrushchev, but I wasn't sure. Like, he's another one I could not identify offhand. Like, you know, so the point is, this game is absolutely dripping in the old communist totalitarian aesthetic, and you know that flows into the design and the mechanics of the game, as you are playing I'm not even sure what to call him. Like, it's like you're
a worker who decides that they don't want to be a worker anymore, so one day they just walk off the job, which is a lot harder said than done, seeing as how there are machine guns that will shoot you if you step out of line.
Right. Not that hard. Like, but in terms of genre, this is a puzzle platformer, and it's also I qualify it as a cinematic platformer.
It's like, very similar
it's very,
to Abe's
out
Odyssey.
of this worldish. The action and platforming is very slow and slightly awkward.
Yeah, it's it's pretty. It's deliberately clunky. Not just because it's following the footsteps of, say, Prince of Persia or Oddworld, but it's also that's kind of what the aesthetic's all about here. You know, you're playing as a clunky ass robot. You know, and you're not expected to be all that maneuverable. Like, and that's important to keep in mind, because you know jumping and such is going to be on the frustrating side some of the time.
Stiff might be an understatement.
You're supposed to be a robot? I thought you were a dude.
I don't know exactly what he is. Like,
you are certainly a robot in the Rossum's Universal's robot sense, but they were organic and capable of.
It's possible that he's organic, but it's like.
And when you die, you just kind of go up in a puff of smoke, so that doesn't help.
It's also, he has an antenna that is used in gameplay. Like,
I thought that was like part of the your backpack thing that just gives you instructions.
I'm like, it's possible, but like I said, I'm honestly not sure if this is a robot or if it's an abstraction or whatever. You know, him
or
being
if it's
a literal
both.
Yeah, it's like him being a literal robot would not be off base thematically at all.
Indeed.
No.
Anyway, you decide to escape, and a little ways into the game, you gain one of the devices that the supervisors use to give instructions to workers, aside from just the general stuff. So then you have to control and take advantage of the other workers who aren't trying to escape the machine in order to escape.
Right. And that's the basic premise of the entire game. Like, pushing forward in order to escape. Like, first the factory. I will say you will leave the factory, but suffice it to say, the outside isn't a safe place to be.
Nope.
Like, yeah, and you'll be dealing with various iterations of getting around security cameras that shoot you on sight. Pretty like fucking laser accurate.
There are a few that you actually have to trip and then hide from, which annoyed me because most of the time there's not much you can do once you trip them.
Yeah, it's like when you trip them, you pretty much failed. Like some of the time,
you can get lucky from time to time, but not very often.
Yeah. I'm like,
but then there's like an early room where you have to trip them and wait for them to run out of ammo to move to the next area, and then you can destroy the gun.
Yeah, you will see a lot of variance. I mean, in terms of actual complexity, the puzzles aren't much. In that way, it's not so much how to figure them out; it's making it work in its execution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which is the difficult part.
There are a few times where it can be a little bit tricky to figure out what you're supposed to interact with and how, because not like 90% of the time, whatever it is has a red or white light on it, but the other like 1% of the time you're like, oh, I was supposed to jump on this barely distinguishable section of floor in order to break through.
Yeah, it's like I think my least favorite puzzles were the multiple bike puzzle, because that really didn't increase anything except the tedium. It was a puzzle I had already seen, and they had demonstrated it, but it didn't get so much harder as it got longer to complete.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, that could have been reworked, and the flotation device puzzle, like when you're like heading down a river or something like that. It's just because that the way that worked was kind of counterintuitive to the thinking. Like you had to jump on it, but it was going to go the other way. But those moments were few and far between. Like there were a few moments that I saw some genuine cleverness. But in general, I'd say the puzzles are very, and this is probably intentional, very workmanlike. Like they're pretty easy to understand. It's just actually completing the puzzle is the tough part. And I'd say the biggest shift in dynamics is when you get a sidekick. When you get outside the factory, and that comes into play with the puzzles a lot. The city.
Yeah.
Now getting back to the general aesthetic of things, like the art design and the tone and everything is pretty popular on the indie circuit, although it's going more on the gritty side of things. I've heard it most comparable to the game Inside. I have not actually played that one, so I couldn't make a direct comparison. But I've been playing quite a number of bleak indie games. That is, like last week I played Insanely Twisted Shadow Planet. We have Hollow Knight after this, and next week we have Toby the Secret Mind, and they're all pretty similar in terms of very black and white, very drab, very high contrast kind of aesthetics. This is an art style that's been going on for quite a number of years now.
Mm-hmm.
It's just Black the Fall differentiates itself with its it's not cute in any way. It's very gritty. It's very I hesitate to use the term realistic, because it's also highly abstract. But
it's sort of cynicalized. I don't know.
Yeah.
Although that's for this game at least.
Yeah, and it's also not completely black and white or colorless, or like once you get outside, things are actually really lush, like really green. And there's a reason for that. The area is taking cues from Chernobyl and Pripyat.
Yeah.
Like at one point,
it turns out that when all of the people leave an area, it starts regrowing.
Yeah. Although
even if that's because of
Yeah. Although there are still people around, everyone's one of these cogs in the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and once again, that figures into gameplay.
Right, because otherwise you wouldn't have anyone to use the laser pointer on.
That's not true.
Okay, otherwise you'd have less things to use the laser pointer on.
Again, that's not true. Like, your doggy sidekick.
Okay.
Yeah.
Still less, but yeah, I know what you mean.
Let's see. The music, I think was there. Like,
yeah, good question. There's more ambient sounds and music,
yeah,
honestly.
Like, I'm seeing a listing for a soundtrack here, and I'm like, was that? This is one of the. I'm like, there was a soundtrack here because I am completely blanking on hearing music in this.
Yeah, I don't really remember any music. Besides maybe the end, I guess.
Yeah, it's like maybe it's like ambient stuff. I'm like, I'm having a hard time remembering any sort of music here.
I recall something towards the end, but otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, it's like short bits, maybe, but nothing. This is actually quite the silent game for the most part. Mm-hmm. Once again, intentionally so.
Except for occasionally alarms and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's more ambient noise and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, I am straining here. I'm like, nope. Like, a few tracks come to mind, but I'm like, a regular soundtrack? I'm like, and it looks like, looking at the tracks, some of them are quite lengthy. I'm honestly like, seriously?
Could be the ambient noises if you're a fan of those.
Yeah, I'm like, I am having a hell of a time. I'm like, and that's not helping my recommendation of the soundtrack. I'm like, it's like,
yeah.
I don't know what any of this sounds like. Like, if this is a soundtrack, if this is a soundtrack that's alongside, or if it's actually stuff in the game. Like,
Adam, clearly you're not understanding this. Clearly they're starting a new breakthrough genre of dystopian new Soviet ambience punk.
That hurt.
It's funny because it could be true.
Yeah. Anyway, outside of the game's art style, graphically this game looks very good.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, trying to remember. I want to say this was UE4, but I'm trying to think. I know.
I think this might actually be a Unity game.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It's one of the two. Like, hang on. Let me check here. Black the Fall. See if it has. I'm like, the thing of it is, I didn't see a logo at the beginning, but that doesn't disqualify it from being a Unity game.
Yeah, this game did a thing that often Unity games do, which is make my computer's fan go nuts with the. It didn't help that there wasn't much in the way of options for turning down the graphics.
Mm.
But yeah, my computer was not happy playing that. This is mostly because my computer is not a great computer, but
yeah, it's here are the system requirements are an Intel Core Duo, EB400, 3 gigahertz, AMD Phenom 2, X4 940, 3 gigahertz, memory, 3 gigs of RAM, graphics at GeForce GTX 550 Ti, 1 gig, Radeon R7 250, 1 gig. These are the minimum requirements. So not surprising that your computer could run it, but not great because the recommended are much higher.
Yeah, it was working fine. It's just the computer was clearly struggling to make it work fine.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's like Unity can do that, but I'm not like that's often a symptom of it could be either power or optimization. Like with Unity, a lot of the time it's because people didn't optimize that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, yeah, Black the Fall is made with Unity. Like, yeah, so that would explain the jitteriness. Like, that being said, graphically, this game looks pretty astounding. And I can tell you that this was done with the paid version of Unity. See, this is something I picked up a little while ago. With games that have the Unity logo displayed on it prominently, that's the free version. Like that's the trade-off for using the free version of Unity. You get to display the logo very prominently, versus if you pay for it, you don't have to display the logo. And this is actually kind of one of the reasons why Unity has garnered the reputation it has, because a lot of the garbage games done with the free version have that Unity logo on it, whereas a game like Black the Fall, which looks astounding, not just aesthetically, but in terms of visual fidelity, unless you were told, you probably wouldn't know this was made in Unity. Now, I suppose an unfortunate situation that probably warrants further discussion, but that's that's kind of for a Wednesday show.
Why do you insist on putting out visible advertisements for all of your lowest level products?
Like
anyway. You said, for another show.
Yeah. Also worth noting, there are the requisite secrets to collect. Surprisingly, I didn't find any of them.
I found one of them by going the wrong way for quite a while, pretty early in the game. Like, there's a place where you're supposed to jump across a gap, but if you fall down the gap and keep going for quite a while, you can find this little room with a little old man in it.
Yeah, it's like there's a bunch of secret rooms which pad out the trophy/achievement list.
Mm-hmm. Which otherwise is pretty. I mean, even with all of the secrets, there are 14 achievements.
Right. Yeah. In terms of length, it's not. It all depends. Like, it's going to be about, I'd say, 5-6 hours if you don't use a walkthrough. If you actually try to figure out the puzzles, because granted, a lot of them aren't difficult conceptually, but some of them will trip you up.
Like the very first puzzle in the game, I didn't get it immediately, even though it's pretty simple. One of the reasons is because I did the thing you're supposed to do to solve it, but I thought I had done the wrong thing because I didn't do it fast enough, so I still got shot with a gun in the next room.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, a lot of these are trial and error and more about brain power.
Yeah, it's like, and if you do know what to do, like I've seen playthroughs go like a couple hours, like an hour and a half, 2 hours kind of deal. It's not a long game.
No.
I'm like, and that kind of flows into price. I'm like, so the game is $15. I'm like, this is kind of hard to recommend at $15. As much as I liked, I really enjoyed the aesthetic. I enjoyed the conveyance, and I tolerated the puzzles. I'm like, the game was just a little too short for me to say, yes, this is worth $15. Like, $10, I think, would have been a better price.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but $15 is pretty standard. So if you go the full Monty, you're not going to feel cheated or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Also worth noting, as previously mentioned, there is a um, collector's edition slash upgrade. It's your standard soundtrack art book collection, going for $5 or a little less if you own the game. Like we got gifted the game, but not the extra stuff.
Uh-huh.
I'm not.
Yeah, art book might be worth it. Soundtrack,
Yeah.
I don't know. I would not recommend jumping in on the soundtrack unless you like play the game and notice it.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah. The art book, I definitely say, given like the imagery is one of the most striking features of this piece.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm like, whether or not that's worth $5 is yeah.
I'm kind of an art book whore, so it's probably worth it to me.
Yeah.
But
I'm like, soundtrack can't recommend it in any capacity because when I'm seriously drawing this much of a blank to the point where I'm like, there was a soundtrack. I'm like, how can I recommend that? Like, it's weird because this is going to be like the complete opposite in the next review. Um. Anyway, let's see. Anything else that we haven't covered that we need to cover?
Mm. I think that's about everything.
I'm guessing we've touched all our bases then. So, in lieu of that, final thoughts on Black the Fall.
I thought it was okay. It's not really my favorite genre, but it seems to be a pretty decent execution on the concept they're trying for.
Like,
I like the metaphorical showing visual display of the communist machine that it was conveying and messages trying to get out, and that was all going back to Romania's communist era.
Yeah, that is a thing I really enjoyed, and I'm literally seeing a lot more of in games lately. Um, there's an emphasis on visual storytelling here. Like, there's not one word of text.
Mm-hmm.
There's no cutscenes. There,
it's video games trying less to be movies and more to being art on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of ironic since this is a cinematic platformer, yet it's not very cinematic in terms of, here's a very long cutscene that you have to watch for an amount of time. And, this is very much the Half-Life style of game story progression.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like the use of color. Most of it is black and white with earth tones and greenery outside, but you do get color, you do get red, and you understand what the red is.
It's usually danger.
Yeah, you get orange and so on and so forth, and it really it's a lot of high contrast stuff that really sticks out, and it's intended to stick out. Like the elevator here that Pettyfan's at. It highlights the up and down portions of the elevator. So ultimately, I'd say this is a really solid game in most respects. It's not like if you're not somebody who can deal with stiff mechanics or controls, you may want to steer away from this. Really, the biggest thing that's kind of hurting my recommendation is the length. Like, it's, I'm just not getting past the fact that it's kind of on the short side, and that was disappointing.
Yeah, I expect a little bit more.
Yeah, but it's not a deal breaker either.
No.
It's like 7 out of 10 if I had to give a arbitrary game ranking. Maybe an 8. Maybe an 8 because I just really like the aesthetic and the imagery.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that'll about do it for Black the Fall. Be sure to tune in about a half an hour from now as we review Hollow Knight. And until then, I wish you good gaming.